If I could see the spirit of a German soldier and the spirit of an Australian soldier together, they would be asking each other, what were we doing? What was this all about? You've got a family, have you? Yes, so have I. You've got children, have you? Yes, so have I. What are we going to tell our descendants about this? I'd probably shake your hand and say, mate, you were doing what you were doing. I was doing what I was doing. It wasn't personal, but why were we doing it? And before we go to war again, ever, we should always be asking ourselves, why are we going to war?
Australia sort of had two main campaigns, I guess, in the First World War. The first one being Turkey and Gallipoli, which was in 1915, and then the following year, 1916, from about July onwards, the war in France, which then, of course, went to November 1918.
Has anyone heard of Fromelles? A lot of Australians, or every Australian probably knows about Gallipoli, but not many people know about the Somme and this particular battle, Fromelles.
Gallipoli was purgatory compared to France and Flanders. France and Flanders was hell.
Fromelles was probably the bloodiest battle in Anzac history.
The 1st of July 1916 was the launch of a massive campaign called the Somme. The plan of the Somme attack was to send the Allied forces, particularly the British forces, charging over the tops of the trenches towards the Germans to see if they could claim the trenches and push them back. Britain suffered 60,000 casualties in that first day of the Somme, 20,000 deaths. Certainly history tells us that's where Australia came in, and it all happened very quickly. They went to a lovely little sort of French village, a little place they called the Nursery. That almost gave a bit of a false sense of security. If this is what war was going to be like, great. The first major battle in France was Fromelles.
They said, right, how can we stop the French from being slaughtered? Let's put in a heap of people from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, England, and we'll get them slaughtered, and that'll take the pressure off the French.
Because they were already taking massive casualties on the Battle of the Somme.
It turned out to be on the 19th of July because it was delayed due to bad weather. These Aussie recruits, about to face their first battle in the First World War, for many of them, are in the trenches and they look up and see hanging off the German trenches a sign that says, "Come on Australia, we were expecting you yesterday."
And the saddest thing about this is that line after line of people just kept getting sent over the top, running towards the enemy.
Life was cheap. They thought that's the way it had to be done.
If you were in that situation and you were told that you were going to go and you weren't in the first line, but you were the second line or the third line, and you could see that the people in front of you were hardly even getting up over the trench, how many of you would actually run? Do you know the sad thing about that was if you didn't go?
They had trench police, and so the British trench police would shoot you.
This photo was taken at the Battle of Fromelles, just before everybody went over the top. Of those 8 people there, within the next couple of hours, 5 died. The other 3 were injured. Can you have a look at your list? You randomly selected 5 names. I asked you to put yourself in the situation where 8 of you are there, randomly, probably just like these blokes. Didn't really know much about what was about to happen. Really didn't know much about, what they were fighting for, or certainly the hatred of what they were fighting for. And in a few hours, 5 of them would be gone.
Machine gun fire just literally showered them and just cut them down at the knees, line after line after line. 5,500 casualties in just a few hours and 2,000 Australian deaths.
Can you imagine that on one day you're in the trenches with nearly, maybe 900 fighting men, and the next day 715 of them either are dead, wounded or prisoner? Can you imagine how demoralising that must be? Blokes you went to school with. My understanding is that the Germans buried the Australians as well. They didn't just leave them on the ground, they buried them. And I think that was, in my opinion, quite honourable, really.
I think they worked out the men who were sent there weren't there of their own volition. They were sent there by people who were of a higher order, and they were just following orders.
On both ends of the barrel, men are the same. They've got wives, children, families. Doesn't matter who they are. They would have seen the enemy as having put up a brave fight. Let's bury them too.
That was the first battle, the first of many. What we faced in the next 2.5 years in France was a further 55,000 Australian deaths and 130,000 injuries.
We lost a whole generation of future lawyers, doctors, politicians.
I guess the whole thing of mateship was especially important within the whole Australian camp during the war, but also that extended out to the enemy at some point, I guess. So we were able to help everyone, and that's come back to gravitas now, where we get the respect of other countries such as France, such as Germany.
The Australians were people that can do people. Let's do it clever, let's do it different, let's be aware of what's happening and let's get on with it.
They just kept going. With the snipers and everything else, they just kept going.
The French are very thankful to the Australians because when they got pulled out of the front line, they went and worked on the farms because they had no labour. You get streets called the 25th of April 1918 Avenue, and Australian Avenue was part of their DNA. The Australians were there. They were very important in that area.
Sort of proud of what they did because it wasn't for them, it was sort of for us, like coming aboard into the future, and knowing that they put their lives on the line for us to be here now to do what we're doing. And I think that's something everyone should know.
When the war stopped on the 11th of November 1918, it only begun for those who'd come home.
I had a very close relationship with my grandfather growing up, and he was a young boy when he went to the Second World War. He was a very tortured man. In the weeks before he died, he actually sat with me and he said, I still wake up at night time screaming sometimes.
There are little pictures that you take in your mind that you can't help taking, that you can never get rid of. And the things you want to remember, you can't. And the things you want to forget, you can't. What we commemorate, and not celebrate, but what we commemorate is not a victory. We actually commemorate the adversity that the Australians face.
We need to go back to the roots about, societies are about this and understand it. And people don't probably want to know about it, but that's a fact.
Wars, in my opinion, are caused by egos out of control. Don't think there's any glory in war, because there's not at all. No winners, everybody's a loser. There must be a better way, but I don't know what it is.
I mean, the courage to be able to go and face that for freedom, basically.
For young people today, I can only say we should not celebrate, but we should commemorate what those ancestors of ours have done through and gone through, and I'm including here the men, the women, the people back in Australia, the nurses, everybody who was involved. The short answer is they should be remembered for what they did and for who they were.
To me, the most important thing that I want to share with people is that war transcends generations, and the unlucky few, particularly who endured the horror firsthand, I think really deserve the legacy of remembrance.